increase efficiency with advanced features like smooth all-floor suspension, ADA ramp navigation, and stable liquid delivery. Your staff can go above and beyond. Servi Plus is a great addition to the team. Multiple table capability and custom tray configurations. Bigger, stronger. Servi Plus.
Coming up on Arirang News. Former U.S. President Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt over the weekend at a rally in Pennsylvania. Investigations are underway into the motive. Strong global demand for semiconductors has driven South Korea's tech exports to edge up by over 30% in June. Israel airstrikes continue in Gaza, with the most recent hitting a school, killing at least 17, including children. This seems likely to further complicate the ongoing ceasefire talks. Welcome to the 9 p.m. edition of Arirang News. I'm Choi Min-jung filling in for Kim Bo-kyung. We begin in the U.S., where an assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump continues to make headlines. An investigation is underway into the motive. Our Shin Ha-young has the details.
The U.S. Secret Service is investigating the circumstances surrounding an assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump during a rally in Pennsylvania on Saturday local time. Authorities identified the gunman who attacked Trump as Thomas Matthew Crooks, a 20-year-old man from Pittsburgh. CNN reported that Crooks fired at Trump from a building rooftop outside the rally's security perimeter before he was killed by the Secret Service. The FBI says he acted alone using an AR-style rifle believed to have been bought by his father, and there are currently no public safety concerns. According to the New York Times, Crooks came from a typical middle-class background with mixed political views. He was registered as a Republican while his mother was a Democrat and his father a Libertarian. In a primetime national address from the Oval Office on Sunday, U.S. President Joe Biden warned of the risks of political violence in the U.S., saying it's time to cool it down.
My fellow Americans, I want to speak to you tonight about the need for us to lower the temperature in our politics. And to remember, while we may disagree, we are not enemies. You know, the political record in this country has gotten very heated. It's time to cool it down.
Earlier Sunday, Biden condemned the attempted assassination of Trump, calling for the nation to come together as one and announcing an independent security review to investigate how the attack occurred. Trump's aide said he was in great spirits and doing well after the shooting, which resulted in an injury to his right ear. According to the Butler County District Attorney, one spectator at the rally died in the shooting while another is in a serious condition. Trump took to social media some 13 hours after the shooting to thank those who prayed for him and urged Americans to stand united and show their true character as Americans. Trump also stated he would stick to his schedule despite the shooting. He arrived in Milwaukee on Sunday for the Republican National Convention, where he is set to be named the party's presidential nominee later this week. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Now, this shocking incident is leading to discussions about political polarization that results in acts of violence. Our Issue shares the voices of experts and politicians who say that it's time to put a stop to hate politics.
Throughout history, the U.S. has suffered many attempted assassinations of its political figures. 4 of its presidents were assassinated while in office, including Abraham Lincoln in 1865 and John F. Kennedy in 1963. More presidents, including Ronald Reagan and Theodore Roosevelt, survived assassination attempts. And with the recent attack on Donald Trump, an expert on politics and security points to the support for political violence in the mainstream as the driving force of such violence.
What we're seeing is accepting political violence in the mainstream, and then, no surprise, some volatile actors are acting out, and then we say, oh my gosh, how could that possibly happen?
Pape stresses the need for political cohesion to redirect public support from violence toward voting.
We're now at a tipping point. There's a potential for this whole thing to spiral now that we've passed this threshold, and this is the time to come together against political violence.
The problem isn't that of the U.S. alone. In 2022, the former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, was shot and killed. Following Saturday's attack on Trump, South Korea's political circle, which too has experienced acts of violence in recent months, spoke out against these. Both the ruling People Power Party and the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea vowed in unison to take the lead in eradicating extreme and hate politics. 이시후, Arirang News.
South Korea's unification ministry says Pyongyang's recent disclosure of pictures showing the burning of leaflets sent from the south is highly unusual. The ministry on Monday pointed out the leaflets were floated across the border by civic groups based here in South Korea, given their freedom of expression, and reaffirmed the government's stance to respond sternly to any act of provocation from North Korea. Back on Sunday, in a statement carried by the state media, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's sister Kim Yo-jong warned of retaliation against the latest South Korean leaflets, vowing a, quote, very high price. The domestically developed Bigung guided missile has successfully passed the final test conducted by the Pentagon in Hawaii, raising hopes for South Korea's first ever arms deals with the U.S. I myself was in Hawaii last week to talk with key U.S. military officials about this historic test fire. Let's take a look. South Korea's Bigung Poniard guided rocket system has passed the final test needed for potential use in the U.S. The weapon, developed by defense company LIG Next One in cooperation with the Agency for Defense Development, was test-fired in waters off Hawaii last Friday on the sidelines of the Rim of the Pacific maritime exercise. LIG Next One announced Monday that the Bigungs successfully hit all 6 targets. Friday's test was the last in a series of successful evaluations conducted by the U.S. Defense Department over the past 5 years. It has shown a 100% hit rate in all foreign comparative tests aimed at evaluating whether foreign weapons satisfy valid defense requirements for use in the U.S. The Bigung is a 70mm low-cost guided imaging rocket that can be fired from land, sea, and air. It's known for its cost-effectiveness and ability to accurately hit multiple targets at once. Friday's success marks a significant milestone as it would open the door for exports, representing the first time a complete South Korean-made weapon system is integrated into Washington's arsenal.
Exports would come following a budget approval by the US Congress and a contract procedure after the test launch. We are working on this in many ways.
A day before the launch, the U.S. Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Lisa Franchetti visited the South Korean Navy's vessel, the Cheonjabong, where the test launch took place, to take a closer look at the weapon. She said the launch test of Bigung during RIMPAC 2024 marks another advancement in integrating unmanned systems into U.S. naval operations. Commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command Samuel Paparo also showed great interest in the South Korean weapon.
If we're not curious about each other's capabilities, we do each other a tremendous disservice. So of course, I'm interested in this. And if we could find ways to build it either on license from each other, or we find ways to build it on export from each other, if it works and if it's good, and if it benefits our alliance, we should do it.
Following the successful test results, South Korea would now have to see if it could clinch its first ever defense export deal with the U.S. Korea's tech exports jumped over 31% in June, bolstered by semiconductor shipments overseas. Our Lee Soo-jin has the latest numbers.
Semiconductors once again led the increase in South Korea's tech exports last month. Data released by the Trade Ministry on Monday shows that ICT exports in June reached $21 billion. That's an increase of 31.1% compared to the same time the previous year. It's also the largest ever recorded for the month of June and the third straight month that tech exports have seen an on-year increase of more than 30%. This was driven by outbound shipments of chips also reaching a record high last month. Chip exports surpassed a previous record set in March 2022 on the back of growth in the AI market and the recovery in the sales of IT devices. Memory chip exports were especially high thanks to the increased demand for high-value products like high-bandwidth memory chips. As for other tech exports, displays saw double-digit export growth for the 5th consecutive month, and computers also saw a rise for the 6th straight month. By country, South Korea's exports to China, the nation's biggest destination for ICT exports, saw an on-year increase for the 8th consecutive month in June. Shipments to other nations such as the United States and the European Union also rose, but there was a slump in exports to Japan. Meanwhile, ICT imports last month dropped 5.1% on year due to fewer inbound shipments of chips and rechargeable batteries. As for the first half of the year, ICT exports rose 28.2% to $109 billion, the second largest amount of exports on a 6-month basis. This was also driven by outbound shipments of chips rising nearly 50% on year on the back of strong demand. During the January to June period, other tech exports such as displays and computers saw a double-digit increase compared to the previous year. And exports to China during this period rose more than 37% on year. Imports, on the other hand, fell on year, leading to a trade surplus of $41 billion. 이수진, Arirang News.
This year marks the 200th anniversary of the cultivation of potatoes on the Korean peninsula. Potatoes were an emergency crop that was a great food source during periods of austerity. Now, South Korea has become a nation that exports seed potatoes even to countries where they originated. Our Pyongyang reports.
This place filled with glass houses is the Highland Agriculture Research Institute, the #1 research center for potatoes in Korea. It is a prerequisite to ensure disease-free seed potatoes, since the tuber exhibits clonal propagation, which can pass viruses onto the next generation. In this place, 160,000 disease-free seed potatoes are produced using hydroponics with additional nutrients such as calcium and magnesium. Potatoes arrived in South Korea in 1824 during the reign of King Sunjo of the Joseon dynasty, becoming a major food source during times of austerity. In 1961, official research into potato cultivation began with a specialized research institute being opened in Taegwallyeong. The research center successfully developed new technology to produce and replicate disease-free seed potatoes through hydroponics in the early 1990s for the first time in the world.
Dr. Woo Jang-chun set up the research center here in Taegwallyeong, where the cool climate is ideal for growing potatoes in summer.
The center has promoted 47 species of potatoes so far, establishing South Korea as an advanced country that exports disease-free seed potatoes to 20 countries in Africa, Asia, and even South America, where potatoes were first cultivated. The United Nations Potato Research Center is also trying to introduce Korea's technology for producing seed potatoes. The Rural Development Administration held an international symposium highlighting the history and achievements in research and development of potato cultivation through international cooperation, marking the 200th anniversary of the introduction of potatoes to Korea. Now, Korean seed potatoes are in the global spotlight as they have also become a source for cosmetics and medical supplies production beyond food resources. 차윤경, Arirang News.
China's economy slowed in the second quarter, missing growth estimates due to weak domestic demand. Data from Beijing's National Bureau of Statistics on Monday showed that the country's GDP in the second quarter of the year rose 4.7% year-on-year. This is lower than the 5.1% growth predicted by analysts in the Reuters poll and the 5.3% expansion seen in the previous quarter. Retail sales rose by 2%, below the forecast of 3.3%, putting pressure on policymakers to boost the market as they start China's high-level policy meeting, the third plenum, on Monday. In the Middle East, Israeli airstrikes continued in Gaza over the weekend, with the most recent hitting a school, killing more civilians, including children. Our Ian Jin reports.
On Sunday, another school in the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza was struck by Israeli airstrikes. At least 17 people, mostly women and children, were killed, and 80 were wounded in the strike on the UN-run Abu Araban school, which Gaza Civil Defence Agency says was housing thousands of displaced people. The Israeli military said the operation was against terrorists, who triggered the start of the war with their attack on Israel on October 7th. This is the fifth attack on a school since July 6th, with Israel saying that Hamas uses schools, hospitals, and other public infrastructure for military purposes, which Hamas denies. It also follows Israeli attacks on Saturday night on the Al-Mawasi refugee camp in Khan Yunis that killed at least 90 people and injured hundreds. The Israeli military claimed that the target of their attack on Saturday was Hamas commander Mohammed Deif and the commander of the Khan Yunis brigade Rafah Salameh. Israel has accused both of masterminding the Hamas-led October 7th attack on southern Israel. But with no confirmation of whether the targets were struck, Hamas says only defenseless civilians were killed. The Al-Mawasi attack on a designated humanitarian safe zone in Gaza was condemned by the United Nations and countries across the Middle East. Egypt, among mediators working toward a ceasefire deal, said that the ongoing violations would only add serious complications to reaching an agreement. Meanwhile, the United Nations says the attacks may have breached international law, adding to a UN report from March that Israel may be committing genocide in Gaza. 이은진, Arirang News.
And back in Korea, most trainee doctors have not returned to their positions despite Monday being their deadline to decide either to return or resign. Our HeyJeon reports.
The majority of trainee doctors did not return to their hospitals on Monday, the due date for a final decision as to whether they will return or resign. Before that, training hospitals sent text messages asking them to provide an answer by Monday noon. According to the Big Five hospitals in Seoul, very few trainee doctors responded. The hospitals have said that if the trainee doctors do not return or respond, their resignations will be processed automatically. The trainee doctors who have refused to return since taking part in a massive walkout against the government's medical reform plan are saying that the medical school admissions quota hike issue has not been fundamentally resolved. According to the government, as of last Thursday, only 69 out of a total of 10,506 trainee doctors in all 211 training hospitals who submitted resignation letters had their resignations accepted. Also, only around 8% of trainee doctors are working at hospitals currently. After the resignations are processed, hospitals will recruit new trainee doctors starting in September, while it's reported that almost none of them are planning to reapply for training positions. Jeong, Arirang News.
The National Forensic Service informed the police that the tragic car accident near Seoul City Hall on July 1st, which killed 9 pedestrians, was likely the driver's fault. On Monday, police authorities announced that they had completed their analysis of the NFS report and that their investigation into the actual cause of the accident was almost finished. The report stated that the 68-year-old driver pressed the accelerator pedal to more than 90% of its capacity. The police plan to question the driver again later. The driver has insisted that the brakes on the car failed to work, causing a sudden unintended acceleration. President Yoon has appointed veteran news anchor and journalist Jeong HeyJeon as his new spokesperson in a mini reshuffle. The top office announced the new appointment as replacement for Kim Soo-kyung, who has been instated as the Vice Minister of Unification. Jeong promises to communicate with the press in a personal and articulate manner, having joined the Yoon administration's Public Relations and Planning Office last year.
I believe it is my foremost task to engage with the media to effectively communicate with the public. As spokesperson, I will reach out to you first on a regular basis to explain in detail the philosophy and progress of our administration's tasks.
Jeong has worked as a reporter for Korean dailies including 세계일보 and 조선일보 and was the news anchor of TV Joseon. Having received her postgraduate degree in public administration at Harvard Kennedy School, she has directed communications and strategy for private firms such as McKinsey. Yoon's office says it expects Jeong to be an outstanding communication partner for members of the media based on her wealth of experience.
This past Sunday, South Korea observed its first celebration of a special day designated to better accommodate North Koreans who chose to cross the border into the South in search of freedom. Our Kim Do-yeon has more.
Tears and emotions filled the room as songs and messages celebrated the courage of North Korean defectors and their journey escaping North Korea, as well as giving encouragement to overcome their struggles and adapt to a new life in South Korea. Sunday was the first ever North Korean Defectors Day, with the main celebration at the former presidential Blue House. President Yoon, who signed the law to designate July 14th as a day celebrating defectors, promised to take care of those who came seeking freedom as he hosted around 200 North Korean defectors.
우리 정부는 자유를 향한 여러분의 발걸음이 헛되지 않도록 하겠습니다. 대한민국을 찾는 북한 동포를 어떠한 일이 있더라도 단 한 분도 돌려보내지 않을 것입니다.
He also condemned North Korea's human rights violations, referring to the first of its kind government publication, the report on North Korean human rights from last year, and said resolving this issue will be the foundation of the unification. And taking care of the defectors is the beginning, with around 34,000 North Korean defectors currently in South Korea.
탈북민 여러분을 포용하는 것이 북한 인권을 개선하는 첫 걸음이 될 것입니다. 저는 오늘 대한민국이 여러분께 희망의 보금자리가 될 수 있도록 정착, 역량, 화합의 세 가지 약속을 드리고자 합니다.
In terms of settlement, President Yoon vowed to improve the Settlement Support Fund and help defectors with supported savings accounts. For capability, the government will provide them with more employment opportunities with benefits for companies that hire defectors. And finally, harmony. The government is looking to tackle discrimination while offering mentoring programs with already arrived defectors helping newcomers. Yoon also re-emphasized that as North Korea are South Korean citizens, protecting them is essential for achieving true unification. In the meantime, people outside of South Korea also joined in with messages of encouragement.
We have had the privilege of meeting a few North Korean defectors and
some of the strongest people in the world, strongest and most courageous people in the world. And we're really proud of you and just want to encourage you to follow your dreams.
In the meantime, President Yoon also met with the Little League Baseball team of young North Korean defectors, the Challengers, to send them off for a trip to the U.S. President Yoon congratulated them on their journey to the birthplace of baseball, the United States, as future national team players of a free and unified Korea. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
As today's chobok hit all over the country marked the beginning of midsummer, with the Seoul metropolitan area where heatwave warnings have continued for several days. Warnings have also been issued in some parts of Jeollado provinces. More heavy rain is expected all over the country tomorrow. Up to 80 millimeters will fall around the southern coast tomorrow, and Jeju Island is expected to see 5 to 30. The Seoul metropolitan area and Gangwon-do province will have up to 100 millimeters of monsoon rain, 30 to 80 in Chungcheongnam-do province. Tomorrow, Seoul and Gwangju will start off at 24 degrees Celsius. Highs will move up to 30 in Seoul and Chuncheon and Daejeon. Gwangju, Daegu, and Gyeongju, 29 degrees. Rainy conditions will continue throughout the week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for today. Thank you for watching. Arirang News will be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Korea time.